Alright, so I'm gonna actually start now. So of course we're looking at homeostasis after coming from the concept excretion. So in terms of homeostasis, there are some conditions that need to remain or stay constant in the human body. Your body temperature, that is one of such um, condition that must be kept constant. And I would have spent some time looking at it last week I should actually say, where if you're in an environment where the environment is hot, that means that the temperature is higher than normal, then the human body temperature will try to be as close as possible to that 37 degrees Celsius. So homeostasis of water balance, that is what we'll be looking at this morning. Now in terms of water balance, we're basically talking about the amount of water that should be in the human body in terms of circulating in your blood. That simply means that if you're drinking enough water, there is some amount of water that should be in the blood, and if you're not drinking enough, there is also a level in terms of how much that should be in your blood. So our body fluid always remain constant, so it is the blood you're talking about specifically. So whether we drink a little or we drink a lot of water, so let's say for example we are not drinking enough water and there is a shortage in terms of the amount of water in the blood, then what will happen is that water will actually leave parts of the body such as your body cells. So that is if you're not drinking enough water. And if your body cells, if they are robbed in terms of its water content, then the cells will actually shrink, and the term for that is known as plasmolyze. So the kidneys, um, these two organs, because if you realize it is actually pluralized, that is simply because you actually have with two kidneys. It is just that, let's say for example you have a family member who need a kidney, meaning that their two kidneys actually fail, then you can donate one of yours, and that is simply because human being can of course function properly with just one kidney. So the kidneys are responsible for the water balance. Now in terms of you urinating, it is the kidneys that actually formulate the urine. So let's say for example you're not drinking enough water, then the kidneys will actually draw back on the amount of water it allow you to expel in terms of you urinating. So if you're not drinking a lot of water, then you're going to actually urinate less, simply because the body realizes that you're not drinking enough water. So what it will now do is to reduce the amount of urine that is let out of the human body. So that is why they are saying that the kidneys are responsible for the water balance. Water that enters the cells blows them up like an inflated balloon, and the term for that is turgid. So once you have a lot of water entering the cells, then it will actually make them get larger in terms of size. So they are giving the description where they are saying that the water basically blows them up, and the scientific term for it is turgid. Alright, so if the body fluids become less concentrated than body cells, so less concentrated now mean that the body fluid have more water than in the cell. Because when we are talking about water, when we use the terms concentrated and dilute, there's a difference. When we said that the water is concentrated, it means that it actually having a lot of solid particles and less water. And when we say what the water is dilute, that means that it having a lot more water versus um, the amount of solid particles in it. Right, so what the first pointer is saying is that the body fluid, which would be the blood for example, it is less concentrated, so that means that it having a lot of water than is inside the cells. So because more water outside of the cell than inside the cell, then because of that process that is called osmosis, water will now enter the cell and store in that part of the cell that is known as the vacuole. If the cells take in too much water, then they may burst open. Now, under normal circumstances, you're not going to find that happen where the cells take in too much water and burst open. And that is simply because the cells, they are surrounded by the cell membrane. And of course, the cell membrane, because of its functionality, we will say that it is partially permeable, meaning that it will not allow all of the water to enter. It will actually regulate the amount of water that enter the cell. So once your cells are working properly, then they're not going to burst open because they're taking too much water. And that is simply because the cell membrane will control the amount of water that enter the cell. Alright, so should water leave the cells, then they lose this support and deflate. So what they are saying now is should your cells now lose the water that is in it, then they're gonna actually deflate, and that means that they're gonna get smaller. Or if you wanna say that they're going to shrink. Just like whenever you blow air into a balloon and you realize that when you let out the air, the balloon basically shrink. Now as for pointer one, where it is saying that should water leave the cell. Now the only time you will find water leaving the cell is whenever you're not drinking enough water. So this water that is leaving the cell, it now gonna enter into the body fluids. Let's say for example your blood, because your blood always need a certain amount of water in it at any given moment. So if you're not drinking enough water, then this is what will take place, where the cells will actually lose the amount of water in it, and because the cells are losing the water, then the cells will become deflate. So that simply means that it will shrink, or if you want to use the term that is called plasmolyze. So if the body fluids becomes more concentrated, so more concentrated means that the body fluids now having less water and more solid particles, then they are saying water will now leave the cells. So that is why persons are always encouraged to drink as much water as they can, simply because if you're not drinking enough water, then your cells will lose water and become plasmolyzed, and that can be dangerous for the cells if the cells continuously losing water. The control of water balance in the cells is known as Osmo Regulation. Right, so once you hear that term Osmo Regulation, that of course is the way the cells water content is controlled. Alright, so control of water content by what is known as a hormone that is called ADH, and ADH stand for Antideoretic Hormone. In the last pointer, it is actually written out in full there for you. ADH, Antidiuretic Hormone. So this is the hormone that of course stimulate or tell the kidneys how much water to let out in terms of urine, or how much water to reabsorb in terms of what you would have um, being allowed to urinate out. So let's say for example the kidneys already formulate the urine, and within a few hours or a few minutes, within a half an hour, then you're gonna actually urinate. If the kidneys realize that you're not drinking enough water, then it will actually reabsorb some of that urine, some of the water in the urine, and don't allow so much urine to be let out of the human body. So control of water content in the blood is maintained by the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is of course a part of the human body. So that is the body part that actually help to control the amount of water that is circulating in the blood. When the hypothalamus detect a high blood concentration, what that means is that when the hypothalamus realize that your blood is highly concentrated, and that simply means that your blood does not have enough water. So that is what it means when they say the blood is highly concentrated. Now they are saying that the hypothalamus now will now stimulate, or it's going to tell what is known as the posterior pituitary gland. Right, so again, so the hypothalamus will detect it and realize it, and then after realizing that the blood water content is low, meaning that the blood is highly concentrated, then that hypothalamus now will now pass on the information to our next gland that is known as the posterior pituitary gland. So what the posterior pituitary gland gonna do now is that it now gonna produce this hormone that is called the antidiuretic hormone. So if you realize there's a chain of command, meaning that more than one body parts actually work together to ensure that the amount of water in your blood is maintained. So first they are saying that once it is low, the first part of the body that will detect it will be the hypothalamus, and once the hypothalamus detect it, the hypothalamus basically cannot solve the problem by itself. So that's why it will now pass on the information to the posterior pituitary gland, which will now produce a hormone that is known as antidiuretic hormone. So let's move on to the next slide and see what this antidiuretic hormone is responsible for doing. So they are saying now that the antidiuretic hormone stimulate, that means that it instruct, or it tell the kidneys to increase reabsorption of water from the filtrate back into the blood. Now if you realize, then say reabsorption. So once you have RE, which is re, it means that that process would have already taken place. So you're gonna actually redo, just like return or reverse. That means that you did go forward, so you need to come back. Return means that you did give somebody something, you need to bring it back. So the same thing as reabsorption, means that the water would have been sent on to somewhere else. So they are saying that the antidiuretic hormone are going to tell the kidneys to reabsorb some water. Now what this means is that the kidneys would have already produced the urine. It is just that the urine, it is still inside the body. It is not expelled or excreted out of the body as yet. So simply because the kidneys get the instruction to reabsorb some of the water, some of the water, then when you urinate, that urine gonna get less, or the urine is gonna be highly concentrated, because the kidneys would have take back some of the water. So the urine now have a reddish color or a brownish color. So when you urinate, if you realize that the urine is brownish, that means that it is highly concentrated, and that is an indication that you're not drinking enough water. The indication that you're drinking enough water, the urine should be crystal clear, just like how you drink the water, that clear water. When you urinate, that's how the urine should look, and that is an indication that you're drinking enough water. Once the urine have that brownish color, then that is an indication that you're not drinking enough water, because that is showing that the urine is highly concentrated. So again, in terms of the sequence of events that take place once you're not drinking enough water and the kidneys need to reabsorb, is that first, the hypothalamus, which is a part of your brain, that is the section, or that is the body part that will detect and realize that the amount of water in the blood is low, so the blood is highly concentrated. So once the hypothalamus detect and realize that deficiency, then it will now instruct or pass on the information to the posterior pituitary gland. And once the posterior pituitary gland get that information, then it will now produce or release that hormone that is called the antidiuretic hormone, which is abbreviation for it is ADH. So again, let's look at what ADH does. So they are saying now that ADH stimulate or instruct the kidneys to increase reabsorption of water from the filtrate back into the blood. So that means that the filtrate, that would be the urine. So the kidney get the instructions that it need to take back some of the water and put it back into the blood. So this process normally take place once you're not drinking enough water. Because let's say, for example, you is drinking enough water, then the kidneys don't need to do any reabsorption. So hence the amount of ADH that is produced will actually get less. Right, so the most time you will find this happening is whenever you're not drinking enough water, because as I said, if you're drinking enough water, then the hypothalamus, for example, what the hypothalamus will detect, if you're drinking enough water, the hypothalamus will actually detect that you're drinking enough water. And once the hypothalamus detect that, then of course the information that it will send to the posterior pituitary gland is that there is enough water. So because of that information, then the pituitary gland will not produce any antidiuretic hormone. And once no antidiuretic hormone is produced, then of course the kidneys will not be instructed to actually do any reabsorption, and you would actually urinate as normal, and the urine will have that crystal clear color that it should have. So in terms of homeostatic condition, we would have completed two, because last week we would have looked at the homeostatic mechanism of body temperature, and now we just look at the homeostatic mechanism of water balance. So we have a third one that we're going to look at now, and that is blood sugar content. So that is the amount of sugar that should be in your blood, because if there is too much sugar in your blood for any long period of time, that is when you will become diabetic. So whether you're consuming enough sugar or not, there is certain amount of sugar that should be in your blood. But the problem mostly come up when you're consuming too much sugar, because it can be a situation where you're consuming too much sugar, and that now will be putting too much pressure on the pancreas, for example. So homeostasis of the blood sugar content is what we're going to look at now. So that simply means the amount of sugar that should be in your blood. So they are saying that whether we eat a little, no, whether we eat a lot, or it should be not off. So whether we eat a lot or a little, right, I'm gonna make the correction. It should be or. Save it. Right, so whether we eat a lot or a little carbohydrate, the blood sugar level must be kept constant. Right, so the fact that they said that the blood sugar level must be kept constant, that simply means that at any given moment there should be a particular amount of sugar. circulating in the blood. So the insulin and glucagon regulate blood sugar level, and that is the concentration. So these two terms, insulin and glucagon, now these are two hormones that are produced by the pancreas. So these two hormones work together, mean that they regulate or control the amount of sugar circulating in the blood. Now, insulin, that term, I mean, a lot of persons should be familiar with the term. You might not know exactly what its function is, but persons should familiar with that term. Glucagon, this, yes, of course, this is not commonly used, um, like for example, insulin, but we're gonna go into what these two hormone does. So excess sugar. So now we're gonna look at how the human body react when there is too much sugar in the blood, as the heading say excess sugar. So let's say for example you have too much sugar in the blood. As I said before, the human body don't want too much sugar to be in the blood for any long period of time, simply because if that should happen, then you will become diabetic. So let's see how the human body react when there is excess or too much sugar in the blood. So when blood sugar concentration rises, so they are saying that when too much in the blood, receptors in the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas detect the increase. So basically they are saying that when there is a lot of sugar, the pancreas will detect and realize that there is an increase in terms of the amount of sugar. Now, yes, it is the pancreas, but if I should ask you which part of the pancreas detect that there is an increase in blood sugar concentration, that is when you should tell them that it is the islet of Langerhans. So that's the exact section, that's the exact part of the pancreas, because of course the pancreas have more than one part. So that is the exact part of the pancreas that will detect and realize that there is an increase in terms of the amount of sugar in the blood. Alright, so this image here actually explain fully as to what happens if you have too much sugar in the blood. James, realize that James raised her hand.
Terminal screen.
Repeat. Oh, you're not seeing the screen. Okay, I need to reshare it. I'm gonna reshare it. Alright, so you're seeing it now.
Yes, sir.
Alright. Awesome. Just give me a minute. That's it. Alright, so you should be seeing the image large enough. Right, so we're gonna look at this image, and in the middle where you have the circle, you're seeing blood glucose 19 milligram per 100 centimeter cubic. So what this means is that for every 100 centimeter cubic of blood, there should be 90 milligram of glucose in it. So let's say for example that 90 milligram increase and go to 110, then the pancreas now will now start to do its work and try to lower it. That simply means that there would be an excess in terms of the amount, because if it should be 90 and it increased to 110, that means that there is an increase. So the pancreas now need to do what it's supposed to do to get it down back to that 90, and that is whenever there is an excess. So that is what we're going to look at now. So I'm looking at the box here today. The bottom right hand corner where you see blood sugar, blood glucose level rises. Right, so let's say for example you just have lunch or you just have breakfast where you had a lot of sweet. Now the fact that you had so much sweet simply means that your blood glucose level will increase or it will rise. So the pancreas now will not detect it. Now as I said before, it is the pancreas that will detect it, but if I should ask you which part of the pancreas detect whenever there is an increase in blood sugar level or glucose level, then you should tell me that it is the islet of Langerhans. So moving on, so looking at this box down where they said that less glucagon, more insulin secreted by the pancreas B cells. So again, first you have the increase of glucose, and then you're gonna have the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas detect it. Once the islet of Langerhans realize that there's an increase, there's a next part of your pancreas that is known as the B cells. So what these B cells going to do is that they're going to produce a hormone that is called insulin. Understand? So I'm gonna repeat the process. First, you eat lunch or breakfast which you consume a lot of glucose or sugar. So not because you would have done that, there will be an excess or too much sugar in your blood. So the islet of Langerhans, which is in your pancreas, will detect and realize that. Once the islet of Langerhans detect and realize that, then it will now instruct a type of cell in your pancreas that is known as the B cells. Now these cells now will actually produce a hormone that is known as insulin. Now insulin have a very important role. What insulin will do is that insulin gonna convert the extra or the excess glucose in your blood into a substance that is known as glycogen. So see the glycogen up the top there. So glycogen is the excess sugar. So again, once the pancreas realizes that there's too much sugar in the blood, the B cell, which is a part of the pancreas, will produce this hormone that is called insulin. So what insulin will do is that insulin will convert the extra or the excess glucose and turn it into a new substance that is called glycogen. So this glycogen now gonna store inside your liver. So the glycogen is stored inside the liver for later usage. So let's say for example later on night evening you don't have no dinner. So in the after dinner time, then the blood going to need some more glucose. So the body will now draw back for that stored format of glucose. So the excess or the extra glucose that was circulating in your blood, the hormone insulin is what would convert that excess or extra glucose into that new substance that is called glycogen. Alright, let's go back to the notes and see what the notes is saying in terms of what I would have just explained. Right, so see the notes there, so I'm gonna reshare it to realize that first once I change the screen in terms of right, so you should be seeing it now. Right, so when blood sugar concentration rises, the receptors in the islet of Langerhans of the pancreas detect it, and I would have explained that on the diagram. So the B cell, what is known as the beta cell, so the B cell that I see on the diagram a while ago, the B stand for beta, so they are saying that the beta cell now will now produce a hormone insulin. So this occurs after a large meal containing carbohydrate, and that is why I would have used lunchtime or breakfast a while ago. Saying that is if you consumed a lot of carbohydrate or glucose, that is when that process will take place. So they are saying now that the insulin, of course, make liver convert excess sugar to glycogen, right? So the excess sugar or the excess glucose is what will be converted to glycogen. So if I should ask you, what is glycogen? then you can tell them that it is a converted version of glucose. So they are saying that this glycogen is then stored in the liver. So insulin also converts sugar to fat. So the insulin converts the excess sugar to two things. It converts it to glycogen and it converts it to fat. So once you have lunch, for example, and you have too much carbohydrate or too much glucose, then that excess that is circulated in the blood, it's going to get lesser simply because of the job that insulin will be doing. So the insulin very important. So for persons who diabetic, and if the diabetes is really bad due to, and they have to take the insulin, the reason why they have to take the insulin by injection is simply because their pancreas is not producing any insulin. And once your body is not producing any insulin, then that will be dangerous because there will be nothing to convert the excess or the extra sugar in your blood. So as a result of that, then the doctors will have to ensure that the insulin is injected in your body. Right, so the right hand side of the image is what focus on what happened whenever the blood glucose level rise. And the left hand side, that is what happened when the blood glucose level falls, which we're going to look at now. So focusing on the left hand side of the diagram now. As yes, there will be time when you're not eating enough carbohydrate, which of course is glucose. Right, so let's look at the box down the bottom left hand corner where it said blood glucose level falls. So let's say, for example, you don't have dinner later. That is what will take place. So they are saying that the same islet of Langerhans of the pancreas will detect it. So if you realize the islet of Langerhans have two functions, and the two functions are: one, they detect when there is an decrease in blood sugar level, and two, they detect when there is an increase in blood sugar level. That's right. So based on what is on the image, that is what it is saying. Those are two functions of the islet of Langerhans. Now, once the islet of Langerhans realize that there is a decrease in your blood glucose level, then there is a cell. This cell is known, it is called a cell. Right, so it's a different type of cell now. So the B cell is a cell that which is known as the beta cell. That's the one that detects when there is an increase. Now as for the A cell, and the A stand for alpha cell it is called. So the alpha cell now will now release less insulin and produce more glucagon. So the hormone that is produced whenever there is a decrease in blood sugar level is glucagon, not insulin. So we need to know the difference in terms of when these two hormones are released. So again, when the blood sugar level falls, the hormone that is produced is the glucagon. Now what the glucagon will do now, the glucagon will now go to the liver and instruct the liver to convert the glycogen back to glucose. You remember on the other side, the excess glucose, it did convert to glycogen. How many persons remember that?
Me, sir.
Right, perfect. So it is that glycogen. I remember that glycogen is a stored format of glucose. So when there is not enough glucose in the human body just go and draw back for that reserve. So the glycogen now is now convert back to the glucose in the liver, so that the blood glucose level can rise or increase, go back to what it's supposed to be. Right, so let's look at what the notes is saying. The same thing I would have just explained. So low blood sugar level, that is whenever the glucose level fall. So they are saying that the alpha cell in the islet of Langerhans will secrete the hormone that is called glucagon. So glucagon now make the liver or instruct the liver to break down the glycogen back to glucose. And now this will now restore normal sugar level in the blood. Alright, so the image, I'm just gonna go through it once again just to ensure that persons actually understand it fully. Right, so as I said, this image basically tell you what happened in the human body, whether you're eating enough glucose or you're not eating enough. So again, the right hand side focus on what happened whenever you have excess or too much sugar in it, and the left hand side focus when you're not have enough. So let's start out with what happened when you're consume too much. So let's look on the right hand side. So starting out with that box on the right hand corner where they said that blood glucose level rises, and again that would be after you having a meal that have a large amount of sweet or a large amount of sugar. So they are saying that once you would have consumed that meal, then the pancreas, there's a part of the pancreas that is known as the islets of Langerhans. That is a part that will detect and realize and say, guess what, there is too much sugar circulating in your blood. So now it will now instruct the beta cells or the B cells, which these cells they are also located in the pancreas. So it will now tell those cells and say, guess what, you have to produce some more insulin. Right, so once that take place, then the insulin now gonna take that excess or that extra glucose and convert it and or allow the liver to convert it to something else that is known as glycogen. So the glycogen now it is now stored inside your liver. Now the same insulin will also convert some of the excess glucose into what is known as fat. So once there is too much glucose in your body, it is two things that they are converted to. One is glycogen and two is fat. It is just that the fat, it is not convert back to glucose, It is normally work out by the human body. Or if you're constantly just eating and eating, then that is what will allow you now to get overweight. Right, so once you eat too much glucose, then glycogen is what it is convert to and store in the liver. So let's look on the other side now. Let's say for example you don't have any dinner later. So the fact you don't have any dinner now mean that eventually your blood glucose level it will now fall. So once it fall, the same pancreas, the same islet of Langerhans will realize that there is an decrease, there is a deficiency in terms of the amount of glucose in the blood. So what it will now do is that a next type of cell that is called the alpha cell or the A cell will now produce more glucagon, and this glucagon now will now go back to the liver and tell the liver and say, guess what, that excess glucose that you have stored, we're going to need it, and now it will now convert that excess glucose from glycogen back to glucose, and of course put it back in the blood so that the blood sugar level can maintain. So when we talk about the homeostasis of blood sugar level or the amount of glucose in your blood, this is what we are talking about. So whether you're eating too much or too little, the body try to maintain the right amount of glucose in the blood, which that figure is in the middle in the circle where it said that for every 100 centimeter cubic of blood there should be approximately 90 milligram in terms of glucose in your blood. And of course glucose is what provide energy to the human body. So if there is not enough glucose, then therefore you're not going to have enough energy. That is why you realize that if you don't eat for a long period of time, you feel weak and sometimes you feel like you're going to drop down. Because glucose is what gives the human body strength to keep you alive, to allow you to move from point A to point B, or just to keep you standing. So if you're not eating Let's say for example you take long to eat breakfast and you stand up, you just feel like you're going to faint because there's not enough glucose in the body to actually give you that strength. So in terms of that diagram, I hope persons understand it entirely, because if you look at the diagram without any explanation, it's going to look confusing. So, right. So after explaining it, I hope that it's not that confusing to you students. So I'm asking a question. You understand the image?
Yes, sir.
Richards, Serena, Davis. You understand it?
Yes, sir.
All right. Perfect. All right. So that notes there basically what I would have explained. All right. So with those two hormones, insulin and glucagon, right? So the NB is saying that insulin lowers the blood sugar concentration and glucagon increase it. Right. So after looking at the diagram, then you can actually pick out this concept. Because remember that insulin normally work when you have too much sugar in it, So insulin lower it, while glucagon normally work whenever you have too little sugar. So that's why the NB is giving that information. All right. So the kidneys. Oh, the kidneys are two organs that basically they have very important function inside the human body. So in terms of the kidneys, to filter your blood, the kidneys they are very important in terms of filtering the blood, because the blood is a body fluid that always circulate, within the human body from organ to organ. And at times the blood it will have a useful substance, and it will have toxic or poisonous substance. So it is the kidneys that basically filter the blood, and that is why persons who have what is known as kidney failure, they have to go on a machine that is known as the dialysis machine at least 2 times per week, because the fact that the kidney is not working, they're gonna need something to filter the blood, and so that is the function of that machine. Because if your blood, if it is not filtered at least 2 times for the week with that machine, then eventually you're gonna die, because the blood will be poisoned by those toxic materials. So the kidneys are attached inside the back of the abdomen. So that is your belly bottom, so the back section there. So in terms of shape, they are saying that they basically have a bean shape, just like a bean or peas, red peas. That's the shape that they say the kidneys have. So they receive blood rich in waste by the renal artery. So the blood lung will contain a lot of waste. So there's a section, there's an artery in the kidney that is known as the renal artery. That is what receive it. Deoxygenated but pure blood is collected by the renal vein and pass back to the heart by the posterior vena cava. So all of those terms, we have diagrams that going to actually show what is basically going on there. Now nephron, now the kidneys basically have different parts or have different components. So the kidney have parts such as the pelvis, medulla, cortex, and of course the renal artery and the renal vein. But there is a part that is known as the nephron. That's the part that is known as the functioning unit of the kidney. So all of the processes that take place in the kidneys, basically those processes take place in the nephron. So in terms of one kidney, they said that one kidney consists of approximately 1 million nephrons. So do the mathematics. Basically, they are saying that your body now contain 2 million nephrons. So because if 1 million is in each kidney. So the nephron is what we're gonna spend some time looking at. Now, looking at the image, now the nephron is the yellow sections that you're seeing. I'm gonna enlarge the image so you can see exactly what we mean when we're looking at a nephron. Right, so the nephron is basically the yellow sections that you're seeing. So for this image, you're only seeing one, two, right? You're only seeing basically two nephrons. But in real life situation or in an original kidney, we basically have approximately 1 million. So the first pointer is saying that the nephron, this is the functioning unit of the kidneys. So in terms of all the functions that will take place in the kidneys, they basically take place in the nephron. So that's why they say that it is the functioning unit. Alright, so still looking at the nephron. So today the image to the right show you a complete nephron. So this is what a complete nephron look like. That's the one that is in black and white in terms of color. And the one to the left now actually just showing you a section of the nephron. So the yellow one now just showing a section of the nephron, because whenever we are studying the nephron, we can't just study it all at once. We have to split it up into different sections and study the parts individually. So the first part of the nephron that we're going to look at is what is known as the Bowman's capsule. So that is the first part of the nephron. So the renal artery basically create a high blood pressure in the capillaries of the glomerulus. Now looking at the image now as to where is the glomerulus. Now this section that you're seeing, so the Bowman's capsule is the part that actually have the U shape. So the U shape is known as the Bowman's capsule. When you look at it, you will see the labeling. So all of this U shape section is what is called the Bowman's capsule. Now as to what is known as the glomerulus, that is these blood vessels that you're seeing where the arrows coming from, that is what is known as the glomerulus. So they are saying that the renal artery create a high blood pressure in the capillaries of the glomerulus, and as I said, the glomerulus is this middle section there where you have the arrows coming from. So what form the glomerulus? Now the glomerulus is basically formed by some capillaries bundling up with each other. That is basically the glomerulus. So you have a network of capillaries that actually bundle up in each other. Now inside those capillaries is where you actually have the blood. So that blood contain both useful
Sir, if you say glomerulus formed by
a network of capillaries. Right, the glomerulus is formed by a network of capillaries. You have that?
Yes, sir.
Right, so inside the glomerulus there, which of course is a network of capillaries, is you'll actually find blood. So the blood contain both useful and of course waste material. So they are saying that there's a build up of pressure. Now this build up of pressure now will now cause some of the particles to actually force out of the small pores or the small holes within the capillaries. So what they are saying now, the pressure force fluid into the Bowman's capsule, and so that is the cup shape region. So if you realize the glomerulus, it is actually fitted in that cup cup shape region, which is the Bowman's capsule. So again, the cup shape part is the Bowman's capsule, and if you realize based on how it is shaped, it realize that it can receive or it can actually catch the filtrate. So the arrow is actually showing those filtrate being squeezed through the walls of those capillaries. So the pressure, so the increased pressure will basically do that. So the pressure will actually force the fluid into the Bowman's capsule, and again that is the cup region, the part that's shaped like a cup. Alright, let's move on and see what they said this filtrate will contain. So the fluid that is forced through the walls of the capillaries, we normally call that fluid filtrate, and that filtrate, it contains different substances. So we're gonna move on and see what it contains. Right, so the filtrate they are saying now, it contains useful substances such as water, salt, glucose, waste products such as urea. So the filtrate now that is in the Bowman's capsule there, so it contains more than one substances, and we are saying that the useful ones that it contain: water, salt, and glucose, and the waste that it contains is urea. So all of those substances, both the useful and the waste one, we're now going to move on and see what happened to those as they move along the nephron. Because remember, you following the arrow, so for as time progresses, it is going down the nephron. So let's bring up this entire section of the nephron. So we have these arrows at number 2. That's where we're looking at over this side. So so once them forced through into the Bowman's capsule, you're gonna follow this direction and go all the way down, all the way down. So let's see what happened as those substances, both useful and harmful substances, move along. So the next part of the nephron now, so we finish with the Bowman's capsule and the glomerulus. So we are moving on to our next section of it. So we are looking at the proximal convoluted tubule. So the yellow section, then basically just cut out the proximal convoluted tubule and I'll show you. Now let's look at the entire nephron and see if you can see where the proximal convoluted tubule. So here's the labeling. So proximal convoluted tubule. So this section right there is the proximal convoluted tubule. That zigzag section that look like a S, that is the proximal convoluted tubule. So they would have cut out that so you can study it in more detail. So the yellow is just showing a cutout section. So what they are saying now, in what happened in the proximal convoluted tubule is that reabsorption of useful substances such as glucose, salt, and water. So what they are saying is that the blood is now taking up back these useful substances. So when you look on the diagram, you're seeing yellow and you're seeing red. And look at the labeling. The red represent capillaries. So the red, so that is the blood vessel. So it is the capillaries that will reabsorb these useful substances. So the water, the salt, and the glucose. So in terms of question now, I can ask you to list, or I can ask you to state or tell me the substances that are reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tubule. So it is a must that you know all the substances that are reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tubule, because you will get it on exam, whether exam I set or exam CXC set. So the three substances that are reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tubule, those are glucose, salt, and of course water. So it is the blood that is reabsorbing it. Simply because if the blood don't reabsorb these substances, they're all gonna pass them out as urine. Yes, James. Alright, moving on to our next part of the nephron. This is called the loop of Henle. James?
Say three substance and the answer that is
Y-
salt
uh,
and water.
Oh, you want the three substance that is reabsorbed at the proximal convoluted tubule? Um, those would be salt, glucose, and water. Salt, glucose, and water. Those are the three substances that reabsorb at the proximal convoluted tubule. So as for glucose, all of the glucose normally reabsorb. As for salt, all of the salt normally reabsorb. And as for water, only some of the water reabsorb, not all. Because remember that the rest would continue as urine. Alright, so we're going to move on to our next part of the nephron. It is called a loop of Henle. So let's look on the entire diagram. So this U-shaped section, we have number 5, number 6 going up and number 5 again. So all of the U-shaped section is called a loop of Henle. So that is the part of it that we're going to look at now. Right, so see the U shape there. So the yellow, so the loop of Henle. Now the descending limb. The word descend mean down. So looking at the diagram, the part to the left, that is the descending side of it. So because remember, whenever you're forming a U, you're gonna go down and next you go up. So this end that is going up to the, so the part that is going up to the right, that is called the ascending, while this is called the descending. So that's, if you look at the notes, so the descending limb mainly allows water to leave into blood capillary. So this section, the section to the left, it is the descending. Its main function is to allow water to reabsorb, while the ascending limb mainly allow surrounding capillary to reabsorb salt. So in terms of the loop of Henle, you need to know which limb or which side reabsorb water, which is the descending limb, which is this side on the left. So you forming that U going down, this means descending. So this is the side that reabsorb water, while the side that is going up, which means ascending side, is the side that reabsorb salts. So in terms of reabsorption of water and reabsorption of salt, you should be able to tell me that yes, the loop of Henle also allow the reabsorption of those two substances. You understand the loop of Henle as in ascending and descending? Students, the ascending and the descending side, you know which one is ascending and which one is descending? Thompson, yes or no? Alicia? Alright, so in terms of reabsorption so far, we would have looked at the proximal convoluted tubule, which we said that three substances that reabsorb in the proximal convoluted tube would be um, all glucose, some salt, some water, and then as for the loop of Henle, we have some water absorbing the descending end, and we have some salt reabsorbed in the ascending end of it. So let's move on to the final part of the nephron. So this is known as the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting duct. So let's look at the entire diagram and see where on the entire diagram those are. Right, so this last zigzag section, see it there labeled as the distal convoluted tubule, and this long region is what is called the collecting duct. So we're going to look at that part being sectionized. So here's it. So fine tune normally take place in terms of the urine, where control body pH level. So the antidiuretic hormone stimulate more reabsorption of water from the distal convoluted tubule and collecting duct. So in terms of reabsorption in these two parts, if the body realizes that it needs to reabsorb some more water and reduce the amount that goes out in terms of urine, then up to these two parts you will also have water reabsorbed. So they are saying that some amount of salt is also reabsorbed in the collecting duct. So in the distal collecting tubule, you actually have salt reabsorbed there, and in the collecting duct, you have water reabsorbed there. So as for the different parts of the nephron, we should know what reabsorb at the different parts, and the notes basically show you that. And on the final slide now, this is the stages in the formation of urine. So when the body is forming urine, it goes through some different stages. So first you have filtration under pressure in the capsule. So that was what took place in the Bowman's capsule. And then we have what is known as selective reabsorption of useful substances from the tubules. And remember that we would have said that water reabsorb, salt reabsorb, glucose reabsorb. And we have more waste can be added to the tubule by the capillaries there. So as you go along the nephron, you actually have waste being added to it. Number 4, water is removed or added to the collecting duct from the loop of Henle. So in the collecting duct, then you will realize that some amount of water was also reabsorbed there. And then now you have urine now will now pass to the pelvis and then the ureter. And then of course, once that complete, then the urine basically form. So again, so this is the nephron, and as I said, the nephron is called the functioning unit of the kidney. So in studying the nephron, to make it easier, we basically divide up the nephron into different parts or different components. So in your own time, you just look at the different components, look at different parts. So this diagram now to the right shows you the entire nephron in completion, while as you study the different slides, you will realize that the diagram to the left, or the picture to the left, basically showing you the sectionized parts of the nephron. So again, the kidneys, their main function is to filter the blood, separate the useful parts, the useful components or substances from the harmful one. So the useful ones would actually reabsorb or be taken up back by the blood, while the waste one will continue down into that urine formation stage, and that given off as urine. Right, so that basically will complete excretion and of course homeostasis. Right, so I realize that Alicia gone, so for most part just about 6 persons actually were actually at class, but that's it for now, students. So as you would have seen, I type in the text and not feeling so well, but at least I try to keep the class. So see you next time, and have a productive day. Now if you realize the content for today, it's a lot in terms of explaining and understanding. It is more technical than previous classes. So in terms of you understanding, again, I will ask that you replay the video so you can actually get it. That is what you would have not um, get in totality. So the video is all there, so please replay the video so you can understand it more. So please remember to indicate that you're present in the WhatsApp group. So have a productive day, students.